I just want to give a trigger warning for both this video and the book that there are mentions of child abuse, sexual assault, drug use, and a number of highly sensitive topics. So proceed with caution if you choose to watch this video. Hello friends, and welcome to my channel, where I discuss all sorts of topics including, but not limited to, sociology, body positivity, feminism, books, and other fun stuff. Today, I will be talking about the book All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, or, as known as, one of the most disturbing books that I have ever read. Now, it's not disturbing in the sense that it's in the horror or thriller genre, necessarily. In fact, it's categorized as a coming-of-age story and domestic fiction, and I quite enjoyed it, even as the nausea from what I was reading crept up in my belly and stayed there for a few days, and still returns now and then to haunt me. I love angsty coming-of-age books. Theoretically, I would rate it 5 stars. It's well written and had me feeling strong feelings. That's all it takes sometimes. I'm not picky. I read it over the course of about 5 hours. I was so engrossed. But in reality, I don't know what to rate this book. I'm not sure that it can be condensed into a simple 1 to 5 star rating. So let's get into this book, what it's about, what I liked, what I didn't like, and my thoughts in general. Be sure to stick around and let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also, just as a general warning, this review contains major spoilers. I won't be holding back. Also, I placed timestamps in the description so you can skip the summary if you want. All the Ugly and Wonderful Things centers around the relationship between a girl named Wavona, known as Wavy, and a man named Jesse Joe, who goes by Kellen. Wavy is a child growing up in an abusive household. Her mother, named Val, is a drug addict, and her father, named Liam, is a narcissistic drug dealer. She and her brother experience physical and mental abuse and neglect. Wavy has to take on the responsibility of taking care of her little brother from a very young age, including feeding him and doing housework. Val, the mom, definitely has a few mental health disorders, but it was the 70s and she lived in an isolated area, so she definitely wasn't getting the help she needed. While Mama was yelling, Donald took her hairbrush out of her purse and put it in his mouth. Before I could take it from him, Mama saw. Once when I was little, I put her pipe in my mouth, just to see what it was like, since she liked it so much. Boiling and bleach could get most things clean, but not the pipe. It was so dirty after I put it in my mouth that it had to be thrown away. Mama grabbed the hairbrush out of my hand and carried it into the kitchen. I knew she was coming back with Listerine or bleach, so I picked up Donald and carried him into the bedroom. Scary Mama dragged me out of the closet and spanked me until the brush left bloody spots on my legs, but I stopped her from putting Listerine in Donald's mouth. After that, I took care of Donald. I fed him and bathed him, because Scary Mama, she would give baths so hot it made your skin bubble. Val teaches Wavy to be afraid of germs and other people, to the extent that Wavy only eats in secret, doesn't allow others to touch her, and refuses to speak most of the time. The book begins with 5-year-old Wavy living with her aunt for a short while, before the aunt becomes overwhelmed with Wavy's strange behaviors and sends her to live with her grandmother. Wavy and her grandmother soon develop a close bond, despite Wavy's trauma, but unfortunately her grandmother soon dies. This is just one of the experiences that Wavy has that causes her to develop a sort of complex surrounding losing people. Eventually, Wavy once again lives with her mother Val. Val ends up marrying her father Liam, and the family settles into a farmhouse just outside of town. By the time Wavy is about 8 years old, she has begun the habit of sneaking off at night to look at constellations. One night, she hears a motorcycle roaring down the road. When Wavy gets up to go look at the motorcycle, she causes the driver to crash. Upon Wavy helping the driver seek medical attention, she finds out that his name is Kellen, and he is one of her father Liam's drug pushers. Kellen and Wavy develop an instant bond to each other despite being almost 15 years apart. Kellen gives Wavy rides to school, signs paperwork, pays her enrollment fees, and even cleans the house while she studies. In return, Wavy teaches Kellen about the constellation and cooks him meals. Everything is great. Both Kellen and Wavy have someone supportive and non-judgmental in an unpredictable world. Plus, Wavy's brother Donnell likes Kellen too. Over time, with their close connection, their relationship delves into romance. Kellen doesn't understand why some people seem to think that he's doing something wrong. Others think that he's taking advantage of a child, but he knows that he and Wavy really care about each other. Their time together consists of cuddling and feelings of togetherness and belonging that neither of them really experienced before. Wavy has no issues with accepting their relationship as natural, but Kellen gradually begins to realize that there may be an issue with how young Wavy is, and he worries that he's taking advantage of her. He attempts to avoid sexual contact with her for as long as possible, and focusing instead on wanting to protect her and prevent her from experiencing more abuse, such as her father attempting to force feed her and stabbing her lip with the fork, scarring her. While various events in the book occur, we get a look at what other characters think of Wavy and Kellen's relationship. Wavy's mother Val doesn't really care, as she's on drugs and depressed most of the time. Her Aunt Brenda, who took Wavy in at the start of the book, thinks the relationship is weird and that Kellen is taking advantage of young Wavy. She considers options like calling CPS, but decides not to, since Val is her sister. During Wavy's current visit with Aunt Brenda, at this point in the book, her cousin Amy notices that Wavy is much more sexual in the way that she dresses, but doesn't have any interest in boys her age that try to hit on her. When Wavy is 13, some tension rises to the point that Wavy and Kellen decide to get engaged. Kellen has mixed feelings about this, knowing that Wavy is too young, but wants her to be able to live at his house away from her abusive parents. There are also some increasing thoughts about how they may be able to engage in sexual contact guilt-free after marriage, even though he is still trying to avoid that. However, Wavy during all this time has been taking an amount of pride internally with how far she can entice Kellen to go with her. However, they never go all the way. Wavy is proud of the thought that she will be a good wife, as she can cook and clean well. They have to sneak around other adults, and they agree that Wavy can't show her engagement ring off to her teachers at school. Suddenly, one day, when Wavy is just shy of 14 years old, both of her parents are shot, and she and her brother Donald are orphans as a result. On the same day this happened, some of Wavy's relatives walk in on Wavy and Kellen having an intimate moment in his shop. A series of events occur that lead to Kellen being imprisoned for rape of a minor, and Wavy and brother Donald are forced to live with their Aunt Brenda. When Kellen goes to prison, he leaves multiple financial assets for Wavy, which her aunt takes control of. Then her brother Donald is taken away to live with his real father, whom they find out is not Liam, and thus he is Wavy's half-brother. Remember that complex that Wavy began to develop at the beginning of the novel in terms of losing people when her grandmother died? Well, Wavy has now lost both Kellen and her brother, to whom she was like a parent. She tries to write letters to both of them, but they keep getting returned to her as non-deliverable. She feels very alone despite living with her aunt and cousins. Her cousin Amy feels sympathetic, but Wavy falls into an inescapable depression for years after. Despite all this, Wavy manages to graduate high school and go to college for astrophysics. While in school, she learns that Kellen has been released on parole. She never attended his parole hearings, as her Aunt Brenda never told her about them. Even so, eventually Kellen is released early. The two reunite when Wavy is around age 21 or 22 in a passionate sex scene, and we learn that, despite earlier implications, they never officially had penetrative sex until now. After, Kellen tells her that they can't be together, or it breaks the terms of his parole. Plus, he feels that he can never get her what she wants and needs, as he is a registered sex offender and can't live or work in certain places. She doesn't care, but they break up. She manages to use her smarts to learn the legal system, and after a long battle, convinces a judge to remove their no-contact order. Eventually, she gets custody of Donald. She and Kellen get married, and the book ends at Christmas dinner at Aunt Brenda's house. Phew! Well, I told you, this book is a lot. When I first picked it out to be my book on Book of the Month, I thought this was going to be a wholesome story of an abused girl who becomes platonic friends with a grizzled adult man, and they find platonic friendship in each other and learn to trust each other, platonically. But no, instead, we get this. I'm almost ashamed to repeat that I really liked the writing and wanted to rate it 5 stars based on that alone. Instead, I'm left drifting, confused, and slightly nauseated. So I guess first I'll talk about what I liked about this book. Number 1, like I said, the writing. No need to beat a dead horse, but it was lovely. The book, if you ignore the heavy subject matter, was an easy read for an afternoon. The writer captured different character voices well, in my opinion. She also didn't try to censor anything for the reader's comfort. What I mean by this is the author didn't try to censor what it would be like for an adult and child relationship to develop romantically. She didn't dance around the subject matter, or the discomfort of people around them, or the discomfort that the characters were feeling, or the implications of the relationship. Of course, saying that it's good that the author didn't censor anything implies that the author didn't have control of the characters or the story, and instead chose to let them run free, when in reality she's creating the story and everything in it. However, the book is based heavily on on an experience that she has as a child and teenager, and one can really tell. I get the sense that it must have been cathartic for her to write the book and even have it end in a way that she may have wanted it to in real life. The book tells us a lot about the author in my opinion, but more on that later. Speaking of the authenticity of characters' voices, I really liked Wavy as a character. She felt very realistic. I loved the relationship between her and her brother as well, especially since she basically raised him. The author did a great job of capturing a character who is parentified, traumatized in general, innocent and yet far too adult at the same time. I appreciated the way that Wavy's trauma was shown as well. It was very realistic and raw, and the long-term effects of what she experienced felt accurate. Also, as someone who's interested in mental health, I appreciated the way her mother's mood swings and behaviors were portrayed, especially as someone back in the 70s where social services were slightly worse than they are now. I also liked the way that the relationship with her and Kellen developed. No, I did not like the part where they were, romantic and stuff, but I did like the pacing and the tenderness of their relationship. The book could have been lovely had it remained platonic. The way their relationship developed made a lot of sense to me, with him being there for her as her caretaker and them taking care of each other. I liked the way he stepped into a sort of fatherly role. In some senses, the author did a good job at making me feel conflicted. It makes me kind of want to vomit saying this, but even the way that their romance developed made sense in a way. I never budged on the feeling that it was wrong, but I do appreciate when an author is able to make me feel conflicted on feelings I hold strongly. Did I ever think they should be together in that way? No. However, I do see why it happened. Wavy was forced to act older than her age from the time she was very young. She had no supervision, no one really to tell her it was wrong. It still made sense the way things happened. Of course, Kellen is a different story, which leads me to the things I didn't like, and general thoughts on the book and other characters. Remember that thing I said about how the author doesn't try to censor anything, which I liked, but at the same time she has control over the situation, since she's the one who wrote the book? Well, I don't like parts of what she did with Kellen. She was really trying to make him seem like a good guy, and unfortunately, I believe her for the most part, even though her efforts to do so weren't quite effective. Throughout the book, it was emphasized that Kellen is sort of seen as a big dumb teddy bear in a sense. It's portrayed that he is seen as dumb and also physically unattractive to most people. The portrayal of what seemed like a slight developmental disability, as well as his conflicting feelings surrounding his relationship with Wavy, felt a lot like the author was trying to justify the way he continued to remain romantic with her. I don't quite buy it. I mentioned earlier, it makes sense in the way that the events of the book led to what they did and why the characters made the choices that they did. That being said, the characters aren't real, and the way the characters are portrayed lead to real-life opinions, and there are real-life people like Kellen. Sure, his actions are theoretically justified, and I do appreciate her attempt to make a more controversial character sympathetic. On the other hand, this book has potential to lead to the normalization of if it's in the right or sympathetic circumstances. Even so, I somehow understood where Kellen was coming from, even though he was 100% in the wrong. Most of us don't grow up in the same environment in which Wavy and Kellen came though, so I question how much harm it could cause when one can't compare their life to their own. However, the author did have a similar experience. One article I read about the book quotes the author talking about autonomy and how she felt that much of her life wasn't in her control, and many people told her she was a victim when she didn't feel that way. In that vein, I feel she is somewhat stuck in her head as a child, justifying the men who may have pursued her under similar circumstances that she's basing the book on. The author's attempts to seemingly justify Kellen's actions via the narrative of the book gets a lot worse when you consider her real-life experience, and those guys were definitely creeps. I will say though, it does make me feel a little bit better that the book was written by a woman loosely basing the book on her own experiences. At first, I thought it was written by a man, which makes the parts that describe certain intimate moments with Wavy a bit creepier. She should still work on her issues surrounding everything though. Upon saying that, she probably has, I guess, I don't know. The way the book ends and certain little details in the book really tell a story about her feelings on the issue though, which we will continue to get into. For now, here's some more Kellen slander and some other things I didn't like. Warning that some of it might be a little petty. There's this scene in the book where Kellen is at one of his parole hearings. One of the judges asks him if he still experiences attraction to young kids. Kellen kind of internally rolls his eyes at this and thinking about how he never had an attraction to children. just Wavy. If Wavy was the first child that Kellen had gotten emotionally attached to, how does he know it wouldn't happen with others? How does he know that he wouldn't have those same emotions creep up for another kid if given the opportunity and same circumstances? But on the other hand, maybe that's the point, that their circumstances are what led to what they did. Changing topics. When they're both adults, Kellen continues to call Wavy Sweetheart, a nickname that he called her as a child as well, which to me ups the ick factor by about 1 billion. I wish that instead, after they had been apart for the 6 years or so that they were, that he at least developed a different nickname for her. In fact, if they must end up together as they did, I wish there could have been some sort of development where they fell in love again, but as adults. Picture this. Kellen goes to prison and eventually works his way through his feelings and comes to a realization that even if their circumstances were the way they were, he shouldn't have allowed their relationship to continue as adults. Meanwhile, Wavy goes to therapy and manages to move on, dating others, and comes to understand what happened. And while she isn't mad at Kellen, she knows what they did was inappropriate. Maybe he doesn't even recognize her at first, but then they're friends for a while, see a good therapist together and also separately, and then maybe get together many years later. Or they could have just been platonic the whole time and none of this would have even been a conversation. Speaking of which, why doesn't anyone go to therapy? I get that it was the 70s and 80s and this was Kansas, but therapy still existed. It really bothers me that Wavy stayed completely traumatized and depressed until she saw Kellen again. I get that some of the trauma comes from people that she came to rely on, Kellen and her brother, being ripped away suddenly and no contact allowed, but there was still the opportunity for Wavy to develop some hashtag girl power then, and she didn't. Yeah, she gets into a good school and gets good grades and all that, but in a way she kind of remains passive until Kellen gets out of prison, and then she uses her smarts and hashtag girl power to help remove their no contact order. That being said, it does kind of make sense that she doesn't move on, and while that part was kind of pathetic, it also shows that raw trauma in a subtle way without making it glaringly obvious. Some readers might feel sympathetic that they can't be together, rather than the sort of adultification she experienced and the resulting trauma. It just makes it feel to me that the power she tries to take back at the end is motivated by getting a man. Maybe the author was trying to be realistic, or say something about trauma, or show that she would stop at nothing to get her family back, but I didn't get that sense fully in the way that it was probably intended. The point would have been far better emphasized if she and Kellen again had been platonic friends. It would have been so sweet for her to try and fight for him to get out of prison in a hypothetical scenario had they been platonic and maybe others accused Kellen of doing something that he hadn't with her. But alas. The last line in the book icks me out in a similar vein as Kellen calling her the same nickname as he did when she was a child. The last line of the book, from her cousin Amy's perspective, is this. Seeing them next to each other, I figured out what was different about Wavy. The top of her head almost reached Kellen's armpit. She had grown. Why? Why did that have to be the last line in the book? I get that the author is trying to convey that Wavy has grown emotionally and her family has grown and she has grown as a person, but it just emphasizes the ickiness to me and feels almost satirical rather than heartwarming. It feels almost like the author is trying to emphasize how much of a child Wavy was until that moment, even though her age was an adult. And I mean, emotionally, it really seemed like Wavy was still stuck mentally as a 13-year-old until the end of the book. But in that case, she really shouldn't have gotten back together with Kellen until many years later, as I proposed earlier. In fact, Wavy's college roommate also observes that Wavy seems stuck as a 13-year-old mentally. Plus, it's mentioned many times how Wavy still kind of looks like a child, very waifish and small and skinny. I'm pretty sure she has to buy shoes from the children's section at some point. So I'll say it again. If her and Kellen had to get together again, they should not have done so until much later. Or the ending shouldn't have been as happy as it was, or there should have been some tangible growth from Wavy showing a transition from her into an adult, more strongly than there was. Or the book shouldn't have emphasized how small she was. I also hated that she never had sex with anyone else and saved herself for Kellen. To me, the way that scene is written, and also the innocence of Wavy throughout the book, kind of fetishizes virginity a little bit to me. Those are some more things that up the ick factor even more. Finally, I wonder again if this book normalizes or if it's done in just the right circumstances, considering that what Kellen does is technically textbook grooming, even if that wasn't his intention. As said earlier, I kind of want to believe it wouldn't normalize such things, because most people aren't in those circumstances, but on the other hand, the character is kind of relatable, and their choices make sense despite the controversial topic, which is good writing in my opinion, but perhaps that makes the normalization more possible, and thus dangerous. Plus, I mean, the book is based on a true story, so it does happen to some people. But yeah, adults should never be with children in that way. I don't like that we're supposed to feel bad for Kellen, but I still kind of do a little bit, even though he fully deserved prison and should not have gotten back together with Wavy. Also, the way the book goes implies that Wavy would have never been happy again had she and Helen not gotten back together. Let me know what you think. So that concludes my chaotic review of All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, aka one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. If you want to read a book with similarly eerie vibes but without the ick factor in terms of the age difference, I recommend the book Uses for Boys. If you want a book that has a lovely poetic writing, I recommend the book The Miseducation of Cameron Post. This book also lacking icky age difference vibes. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, especially if you have actually read this book or plan to. If you need to vent about it too, definitely let it out because I read it several weeks ago and I'm still exhausted from thinking about it all the time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!